Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. My name is Nurjahan Boulden, and I'm a belly dance instructor, a gun violence survivor, a writer, and I'm a Khateebah for the Women's Mosque of America. My family is from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, in East Africa, and I'm excited to share about Bibi Titi Mohammed, who's known as the mother of the nation. And she was also good friends with my grandmother, who happened to be her seamstress. She was born in 1926, and she didn't have an education when she was growing up. She was actually married off when she was 13 or 14 years old to an older man. She grew up, she had her own daughter, and she made sure that her own daughter got an education before she was able to get married. She started getting involved in politics because she was actually in a band, and she would travel around in the band, and they would celebrate, and she would actually round up women and men, but just led by women, in groups that were rallying for independence for Tanganyika at the time. Women groups at that time were deemed apolitical because they didn't really regard women in a high way under the colonial rule. So because of that, she actually was able to rally more people than many other individuals. The expectation at the time was usually for women to support movements, liberation movements, and then once they were successful, to step aside. She partnered with Julius Nyerere to establish the Tanganyika African Nation Union. And then when they won independence, Julius Nyerere became the president of Tanganyika. She stayed in the ministry, and she had a number of different roles. She was really passionate about specifically equal access to employment, education, provision of healthcare, especially for women, girls, and in rural areas. And she stayed really loyal to those beliefs throughout all of it. She was the only woman who was a confidant and close confidant of Julius Nyerere throughout the establishment of Tanganyika as an independent nation, and then Tanzania, once Zanzibar became a part of the country. Once they had established the country, though, and were kind of laying out the laws of the nation, she disagreed with certain aspects of Nyerere's plan for African socialism, specifically something that prevented leaders from owning rental properties. And at the time, because a lot of women didn't have access to education, owning rental properties was one of the only ways that women could have independence, financial independence. So making it so that leaders couldn't have rentable properties really eliminated the opportunity for women to be involved. So they kind of split ways, and she stayed true to her beliefs. And in staying true to her beliefs, she ended up losing almost everything. She got tried in 1970 for treason, ended up being sentenced to life in prison for turning against Nyerere. He ended up giving her a presidential pardon a couple years later, but she moved to South Africa. She lost her home, she lost her friends, she lost a lot, and she really fell off the face of the earth. Obviously not as a human being, but in terms of being erased from history. People stopped talking about her involvement in everything involving the beginnings of Tanganyika and Tanzania, until the 1990s, where they finally recognized her contributions. Even now, it's really hard to find information about her. And one of the reasons I was so excited to be able to share about her and everything that she did was, in a lot of ways, I see my grandmother in her, and they were close friends. And my mom said that she used to go over their house all the time, and they would talk about everything that was going on. Actually, Bibi Titi was one of the people who encouraged my mom, my grandmother, my mom's siblings to denounce their English citizenship as second citizens and embrace Tanzania citizenship. And so that was a big part of their lives at the time. And my grandmother she's from the Belgian Congo, but she had a really similar upbringing to Bibi Titi, in the sense that she was married off at age 11 or 12. She had 4 kids, and she ended up leaving her husband, just like Bibi Titi did. She ended up being an independent woman, moving to East Africa with her mom and her children, and establishing herself as a businesswoman, as an independent woman. And those stories just aren't shared. There are no records of them. My grandmother only learned to read and write later in her life. And so it means a lot to me to be able to share stories like this. The reason that Bibi Titi inspires me is because she never let go of what she believed in, even though she ended up losing everything for it. And I think that sometimes we ask ourselves, what would I do if I lived during those times? And I try to ask myself that every day, because in a lot of ways I am living in times similar to those. And I ask myself, what am I doing to create a change in this world? So that's Bibi Titi from East Africa, from Tanganyika, now Tanzania. And I'm so glad that you took the time to listen. And if you want to look up more about her, I highly encourage you to. Another reason I'm really excited about it is because if Bibi Titi was here right now, she would get to see that Tanzania now has its first female president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, who is a Muslim woman. She's from Zanzibar, and she just stepped into power last month. So it's historical, it's huge, and I'm sure that she wouldn't be able to be here where she is if it weren't for people like Bibi Titi who came before her.